India's Look East policy was upgraded to its Act East policy in 2014 when Prime Minister Narendra Modi had his first interaction with ASEAN. 3 years down the line, India has a major role to play in the region, which was evident in Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to ASEAN-India Summit in Manila. Let's talk to our Senior Assistant Editor Dipanjan Roy Chaudhury more on India's outreach policy. Dipanjan, according to you, how successful was Prime Minister Modi's recent visit to the ASEAN-India Summit in Philippines?
This visit was quite interesting from the point of view that this was a trip by an Indian PM to ASEAN, to Philippines for a bilateral visit as well after 36 years. The last time an Indian PM was in Philippines was in 1989 for a bilateral visit. In 2007, Manmohan Singh did visit Philippines in Cebu, but there was no bilateral component to it. So in that way, it had an added importance, and there was a strong bilateral component to it also. Indo-Philippine relation hasn't realized its potential in the last many years. Firstly, before 1991, Philippines was, we were in sort of in different camps, and Philippines was and still is an US ally. And somewhere there was a gap, So there are efforts now to bridge that gap from both sides, with Philippines as the chair of the ASEAN. In the main Indo-ASEAN summit and the East Asian summit, I think the PM was very focused.
So saw India, Japan, Australia and US revive the quadrilateral after a decade. According to you, why did these countries take so much time to regroup?
The last quadrilateral, as you know, was in 2007. India had a bad experience in 2007 when Australia suddenly pulled out of the quadrilateral, ostensibly under Chinese pressure. And I think that India has been cautious and will be cautious in taking forward the Quad. So we will see steady and slow progress. It was essentially, it took time for India to gain confidence in Australia, and also for have a better understanding between the other three partners, which has reached now a matured level between India, Australia and India, Japan and US, and and three of them separately also have a dialogue with Australia. Like we have an India, Japan, Australia dialogue, India, Japan, US dialogue, and Japan, US, Australia dialogue. So while there were these three dialogues, and which has reached a certain level of confidence and maturity, so it was deemed right to have revive that quadrilateral now at the level of Joint Secretary, and see where it goes from here, and look at some of the things they can do jointly in terms of any projects which they can undertake in the maritime sphere, and see how China reacts to this.
Do you think that the quadrilateral will be able to contain China's growing aggression in the region?
The Chinese immediate statement after this quadrilateral was that they were signaling that they could join, they were willing to join the quadrilateral, but which is a non-starter from the beginning, because the very idea of quadrilateral is to bring a balance in the Indo-Pacific region, in the backdrop of a Chinese expansionist and hegemonist designs, which has made all these countries wary of, and they all like-minded countries therefore want to come together to send out a message. But how you send out a message, the degree of how fast you go out, and that has to be calibrated.
In the past, Australia has pulled out of this initiative, and given its present economic dependence on China, do you think that the diamond of democracies would be able to contain the rise of the dragon in the region?
We have to, watch it very carefully. I guess the Indian establishment is also looking very carefully to this. There are certain elements in Australia who are, who support the fringe groups in Pakistan, which has support from China. There are various kind of reports, particularly during Doklam, when the Chinese students were very active in the Australian universities. They were waving flags against India. So there are these reports which are coming out of Australia, and there is an element of uncertainty as to how it would go. But then 2017 is not 2007. There were very few small groupings, as in like this, either trilateral or quadrilateral, in 2007. So now smaller groupings are the norm of the international relations. So I am confident it will continue, but one has to look, how much does Australia buckle under Chinese pressure or not? Does China bring in any pressure on Australia? if there is a change of guard in Australia, which party comes to power, a Labour Party, and who comes to power in Australia. And a lot of equations, a lot of developments will depend on that as to how. China as of now would like to, if I would say, would like to see how this is evolving and developing, and then probably make a strategy, because one should never forget that China is a country which is both ideological but as well as pragmatic.
How correct it would be to say that it's China and not the US that's driving the agenda in the Indo-Pacific region?
Yes, as of now, China is having an. See, US was the power in the Asia-Pacific region, or now Indo-Pacific region, but somehow US could never form a kind of bloc that it formed in Europe. In the Cold War, which is the NATO. In Southeast Asia, they had individual relationships. There was an organization called SEATO, Southeast Asian Treaty Organization, led by US. It never worked. Rather than US-Japan relationship worked well, US-South Korea relationship worked, US-Australia relationship worked well, and these are strong allies of US in that region. Definitely, China is coming up as the #1 competitor or even getting ahead of US in some ways in this region. It is shaping the agenda now to which US is reacting.
Can India really afford to upset Beijing at this stage?
India has to have, our relationships with Beijing has to be managed. That is the mantra of that has been approached during UPA time. This policy continues. We are probably now more firm in certain areas of acrimony in terms of dispute, whether we are standing firm to sending out message. And as India economically grows, as our capacities will, we can take on much firmer stand vis-a-vis the Chinese adventurism. We have a boundary which is disputed, 4,000. So we have to also keep this in mind, how much we go and what reaction. We have to be prepared for various Chinese reactions. See, we have to remember it is not just Indo-Pacific is not just the Pacific, it is also the Indian Ocean, and where India is trying to emerge as a net security provider. France will be a partner in that process. France has indicated already that because France has a lot of assets. Japan has its own interests in having a stronger presence in the Indian Ocean region. So it has to be a partnership of these countries, but India also have to work with China simultaneously, and that's where the importance of a forum like RIC comes.